You're on the record.
On the record.
On the record.
On RTRFM 92.1.
Imagine a tiny frog who, when born, was just the size of a rice bubble. Now imagine that little guy, a white-bellied frog, on the brink of extinction. That's a reality in WA's southwest and has been for decades. But there is good news. A huge milestone in preventing the extinction of the white-bellied frog has been achieved. Working with the Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions, Southwest NRM are rehydrating creek beds which, when too dry, prevent white-bellied frogs from breeding. To tell us more about the project and the white-bellied frog, Southwest NRM's Chief Executive, Dr Manda Page, joins me. Good morning, Manda.
Good morning, Beth. How are you?
Very well. I'm excited to hear all about this. I gave it a bit of a crack there, but I'd love if you could start by describing the white-bellied frog and giving us a bit of background on them.
Sure, Beth. Thank you very much for having me. So, the white-bellied frog, as you said, is a tiny frog. When it's fully grown, it is still only the size of your thumbnail. The problem is this little fella, and unfortunately some other frogs down here, is critically endangered, which means it is at the greatest risk of extinction, which means it's time to, really do something desperate to see if we can save this little guy.
How long has the white-bellied frog been on the brink of extinction for?
Oh, gee. You've caught me there, Beth. It has been on the critically endangered list for a long time, as long as I've been working here. And unfortunately, being critically endangered, as I said, it means it's on the brink of extinction, but there has been so much work done on this little guy, and they're still declining. So it's actually more desperate than it's ever been before.
Well, yeah, I suppose that every year that goes on with them struggling is getting sadder and sadder and harder to see positive change. Southwest RNM is working with DVCA to rehydrate creek beds. What does that project look like?
Yeah, so this is a really great project, and it's really it's a project that you do when you're at the you're running out of options, basically. So it's what we call a big interventionist project. So it means we're taking desperate measures and trying to do something outside the box. So this little guy is mostly in trouble now because of climate change and, our drying climate, which means the wetland areas where this guy lives is drying up. Now, these guys are completely reliant on having moist soil, especially during their breeding season. So they dig these little burrows and they lay eggs, and then the young sort of come straight out of those eggs. But the water has to stay moist. If it dries up, the eggs are gone and they can't survive. So we have to keep these areas moist. With the drying climate, they're not staying moist long enough anymore. So what we're doing is we are literally putting irrigation systems into these creek areas, these wetland areas where we know they have existed, to just try and keep it wetter for longer. Now that's it's a very expensive and it's a logistically challenging idea. But if we can crack it for this species, then there's many other wetland species that are also being impacted by this drying climate, and therefore it could have impacts for lots of threat species down here.
Well, I'm always thinking about when one specific animal is on the brink of extinction. That obviously has a bit of a lead-on effect within the biodiversity of wherever, or the biome of where that animal is. What have been the effects of the white-bellied frog numbers dropping on other animals?
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, any species is part of an ecosystem, and that ecosystem is probably more complex than we can actually understand. So, much of the time we actually don't know what we're losing when a species becomes extinct, because it has a role. Every species has a role, whether it's food for another species or whether it's what we call an ecosystem engineer. So it makes the habitat right for something else. So it's a cascading effect. Once you start losing one thing, we don't even really understand the implications of for everything else. And frogs are known to be like keystone species. What do they call it? Like the canary in the in the cave sort of thing. Once they go, it really means that we're tipping over the ability of that ecosystem to support other species as well.
Talking about the rehydrating the creek beds, what has the progress been so far? How has it been helping?
Yeah, well, look, it's very, very new.
Early days.
And, very early days, but good results so far. So, we were lucky to get a grant from the Australian government to set this up. And as you said in your intro, we're working with Department of Biodiversity Conservation and Attractions, the Western Australian state government, who have, I've got to say, have done amazing things with this species to keep it, keep it protected for as long as it has. But it's it's a very expensive thing. So we've installed these tanks, and we've installed the irrigation, and we've got these probes and all sorts of wonderful tech gear to measure it and make sure we're doing it right. But now we've run out of money to keep it going. So we've got 1 year of data, and we think it's working. So we desperately want to keep it going.
Yeah, 100%. What has that data kind of shown? Has there been a little increase in numbers, or what are we looking at?
Yeah, too early to say. All we can say is that we have demonstrated that we can keep that site moist enough for the species to breed. So that's right. We won't know about survivorship until afterwards. We're only just sort of, breeding at the moment. But, we have the ability to keep it wet enough, which means it should work, because, there's a lot of work done on this species. The Perth Zoo has done amazing work here as well. They do this thing called a egg starting program, where they collect the eggs from the wild, they take it back to the Perth Zoo, they hatch them and they grow them a little bit, and then they put them back in the wild, just to give them that, that head start. But what we'd love to do is be able to let them do that themselves in the wild by keeping it wet enough for them.
So what do you need to keep this project going? More money?
With most environmental projects, we need money. Of course, we need money. It's always hard. And I'm not being critical, about the funding that goes into the environment, because we just always need more. Unfortunately, the threats are getting worse and harder. The work of all these amazing organisations, state government departments, Perth Zoo, community organisations is fantastic, but we can't do it without more funding. So we've launched, for this very specific project, we've launched a little crowdfunding thing, and a little crowdfunding campaign, I should say. Wonderful. Where we're just trying to raise the money to keep this project going, because, as I said, that initially the inklings is that this could work. If we could do a bit more work on it, and then it could have benefits for this species and many others.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time this morning, Manda. I really appreciate you getting us across the white-bellied frog, and that little guy sounds like such a little treat. We need to save him.
My absolute pleasure, Beth. Thank you for having me.
That was Dr Manda Page from Southwest NRM. You're on the record with Beth Makovich, 1017, here on RTRFM